The Orioles should have a great team in 2024, but how about their opponents? Will the schedule help them or hurt them this season? We'll break all that down. Plus, Kyle Stowers with a 3-homer game in spring training on Sunday. We'll talk about it all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Monday, March 18th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb, and coming up on today's episode, we're going to take a look at the Orioles 2024 schedule. We're about a week and a half away from opening day. What do the O's need to do month by month? Where is it easier? Where is it tougher? Where do they need to make sure they pick up some wins so they can end up playing October baseball when it's all said and done? I'll break it all down by the projections and who they play. And we'll also do a little recap of the weekend, the Orioles' 4 spring training games they played since we last talked. And what a show some Orioles put on Sunday. Kyle Stowers, a 3-homer game. Colton Cowser crushing the baseball. John Rhodes showing out. We'll get to it all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. So we'll kick things off in this one before we get to the schedule with just a little breakdown of what happened over the weekend for the Orioles, because we did have, a little bit of stuff that we could look at. Friday's game against the Rays was televised. There was no StatCast, but we did get a broadcast there. So got to look at a little bit of that. Saturday, we had nothing, essentially. The Orioles did walk it off with 2 runs in the 9th to beat the Red Sox 5-4 on Saturday. That was after losing to the Rays on Friday. So that's a cool thing, right? Even a spring training walk-off is still a walk-off and a cool moment for guys. And it was Judd Fabian who tied the game with a single, Dylan Beavers who walked it off with a single, 2 of the Orioles' top outfield prospects. So that's always cool to do in the 9th inning, but we don't have more past that. On Sunday, the one game in Sarasota, no StatCast, no televised. Orioles did win that game, though. And then the Orioles were in Lakeland. It was a split squad on Sunday, also playing the Tigers. That ended in a 4-4 tie. But that one, although we didn't get a broadcast, we did have the StatCast feed. So we have a little bit to break down from the weekend. And we got to start with Sunday, because the man who stole the show and the man who is kind of stealing the show in Florida this year is Kyle Stowers, who had been great so far this spring for the Orioles, continuing to put pressure on Mike Elias and his staff to maybe have to find a spot for Stowers. Well, Kyle took it to another level on Sunday. A 3-homer game for Kyle Stowers on Sunday in Lakeland against the Tigers. Per Sarah Lang's always coming up with unbelievable stats on Twitter. The first 3-homer game in spring training since it was Mike Zunino in 2011 was the last one to do it. And shout out to Mike Zunino, who just announced his retirement a couple days ago. But I mean, Stowers just unleashing. And here was the interesting thing. The big thing we've been talking about, Stowers, his 4 previous home runs this spring had all come against left-handed pitching. And that was something we talked about a lot. It's like, wow, Stowers had trouble hitting lefties. Now he's mashing lefties in spring. Could this be a good thing for him? All 3 homers on Sunday came against right-handed pitching, which is honestly good because I believe he was 1 for 19 against righties this spring coming in. So that's a good thing for Kyle Stowers as well. He came out of the game, didn't get a 4th at-bat, but second inning, home run, 97 off the bat to right field. We didn't get a distance from StatCast. 4th inning, wow. 104 off the bat, 438 feet. According to StatCast, that ball would have been a home run in all 30 major league ballparks. And then in the 7th inning, just for good measure, this one the hardest hit, 107 off the bat, 399 feet. Would have been a homer in 21 of 30 big league ballparks. Some of these spring training parks a little smaller, more wind helping balls carry out. But man, oh man, like Kyle Stowers on top of it. The 7 homers now for him this spring leads all players in Major League spring training this year. Every single one of them. But here's the issue still. There is still not a clear opening for Kyle Stowers to make this ball club out of spring training. It's just the fact of the matter. At best, the Orioles will have 5 outfield openings. One goes to Austin Hayes, one goes to Cedric Mullins, one goes to Anthony Santander. We know that. So there's 2 spots remaining. You have Colton Cowser, Heston Kjerstad, Ryan McKenna, Kyle Stowers. Basically, it's down to those 4 for maybe 2 spots. But I would argue you have to prioritize Jackson Holliday over Kyle Stowers. Now, you could say, oh, Stowers has already been in the bigs. Keep him up, put Holliday in AAA. That's a possibility. But I think we all want Jackson Holliday on the opening day roster. And if he is, we know Jorge Mateo and Ramon Arias, they're going to be there as well. So that leaves you 1 outfield spot. Between Cowser, Kjerstad, McKenna, and Stowers, you'd probably like someone who can play center field. And if you're talking about good springs, I know Stowers has hit 7 homers, but overall, I still think Cowser's probably been more impressive in spring, and that spot's probably going to go to him. And Kjerstad, to me, is still above Kyle Stowers in the pecking order. Like, it is an uphill climb for Kyle Stowers right now. And even if the Orioles said, you know what, we're going to put Holliday in AAA, there's still an argument to be made that Kjerstad deserves it over Stowers. You can't just take stats from spring training to make this decision, and the Orioles won't be doing that. So here's the question. We know the O's aren't just taking straight up spring training stats, and that's who makes the team. But how many consecutive homers would Stowers have to hit? It was 3 straight in this game. How many consecutive homers would Stowers have to hit for the Orioles to just give him an opening day roster spot? Because they literally just were forced to because of performance. I would say 10. If Stowers hits a homer in his next 7 spring training at-bats, you just got to give him a spot. Let me know in the YouTube comments. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube page. And tell me, how many consecutive homers would Kyle Stowers need for the Orioles just say, you know what, he has to get a spot. There's no doubt about it. It's awesome for Stowers. There's just not playing time there right now. There's just simply not. He's most likely still going to start the year in AAA Norfolk, and that doesn't mean he won't get to the big leagues with the Orioles at any point this year. If he continues to hit like this in games that matter, at least a little bit more in AAA, they're going to call him up. But the ceiling is still higher for Cowser. It's still higher for Kjerstad. I still think those guys can help the Orioles more than Stowers can. And Holliday's in this mix as well. Obviously, he's above Kyle Stowers in this pecking order. He's just in a tough spot. And I said this on Twitter on Sunday, like, maybe you just trade him. If there's a team willing to give you a good big league reliever, because I think the Orioles are still 1 relief pitcher short, and you can make your bullpen better, and all it takes is Kyle Stowers, who, I mean, he's been great, but it's not a huge deal if he's in AAA Norfolk or on another team. I'd pull the trigger on that trade if anyone's willing. If anybody sees this spring and really jumps at it, maybe a less analytically inclined, maybe a bit of a dumber team out there that wants to jump on Kyle Stowers because of a month in spring, make it happen. But the other thing is, like, even if you're thinking that spring training performance carries more weight than it actually does, Colton Cowser's still been so incredible that if there is that 1 outfield spot, it's still going to go to Cowser over Kjerstad. I mean, Cowser had an awesome day Sunday in Lakeland as well. He had 4 at-bats, did Colton Cowser, all 4 hard-hit balls. First inning, ground out, 110 off the bat. Third inning, double, 106 off the bat. Traveled 401 feet. Would have been a homer in 6 big league ballparks. 5th inning, fly out, 96 off the bat. 8th inning, fielder's choice, 100 miles per hour off the bat. He was mashing the baseball, and he's continued to do it all spring, and he's still my front runner to get that final outfield spot. And it just kind of, in terms of the roster, it is what it is. And maybe an injury could pop up that would open space. I mean, Austin Hayes hasn't played since Thursday. He's, Brandon Hyde said he's a little under the weather. The more concerning one is Ryan Mountcastle. He hasn't played since Tuesday. Orioles said on Saturday that it was neck stiffness for Mountcastle. O's are off today, so hopefully tomorrow on Tuesday, the Mountcastle's back in these spring training games. I mean, if it gets closer and closer to opening day, he's still missing time with neck stiffness. He could start the year on the IL. At that point, maybe there's an opening because O'Hearn just gets all of the first base reps, and you could carry another hitter, and maybe that's how Kyle Stowers could sneak his way on. But it's still, it's an uphill battle for him. So I don't know what he can do to push his way on, but let me know. How many straight homers would he have to do to push his way on? Other things just to note from the weekend, Dean Kramer and Corbin Burns both pitching into the 5th inning, as did Tyler Wells. All of those guys kind of on a good track, building themselves up to get ready to be in that opening day rotation. Albert Suarez pitched again on Friday on the broadcasted game. Fastball looked good early, then he got hit around. I just think he's going to go to Norfolk. It was a cool story, but he's going to go to Norfolk. Let's see. We got Dillon Tate. Velo's looking good. Quick inning, ground balls. Love to see it. He seems to be healthy, ready to go. Brian Baker probably on the outside looking in, but he was 97 and 98 with the fastball on Sunday in Lakeland. That's a good sign for Brian Baker. And then I got to shout out John Rhodes. John Rhodes with 2 late home runs in the game Sunday in Sarasota, a 2-run homer off of Dylan Lee, a Braves big league reliever that tied the game in the 7th, and then hit another 2-run homer in the 8th inning when the O's had a 6-run 8th on Sunday. John Rhodes, interesting prospect. Like his tools. We'll see him in Double-A Bowie and probably Triple-A Norfolk at some point this year. Cool moment for him in these big league spring training games, though. And then the last thing from the weekend is Orioles brought back an old friend who wasn't that long ago that he was one of their friends. Peyton Berdick is back on the Orioles. They claimed the 27-year-old right-handed hitting outfielder off waivers from the White Sox over the weekend. Now, the Orioles had originally acquired him for cash from the Marlins back on Valentine's Day when the Marlins had placed him on waivers. Berdick been in the big leagues, parched the last couple of seasons with Miami. Big-time power, awesome exit velocity numbers, awesome hard hit numbers. Just has a giant hole in his swing, and the strikeout numbers are really concerning. There's just a part of the strike zone he can't get to at all. But when he makes contact, it's fun to see. And I think the Orioles see something there where, hey, we can go check this out. Back when the Orioles did claim him, back the week of Valentine's Day, I did an episode kind of breaking down Berdick in full. Make sure to go back and check that one out if you want more information on Peyton Berdick. But he is back in big league camp with the Orioles. It's on the 40-man roster. But what they did do, because once the Orioles picked him up, they then DFA'd him 5 days later to make room for Caleb Ort, I believe. White Sox claimed him. White Sox kept him in camp for about a month. Then the White Sox made the Dylan Cease trade, and they needed room on their 40-man for the return, and they DFA'd Peyton Berdick. So the Orioles claim him again, and immediately, although they keep him on the 40-man, they option him down to minor league camp. And this is interesting here. Now, this might sound like I'm putting my tinfoil hat on, but just hear me out here with Berdick going to minor league camp. He is a right-handed hitting outfielder who can play all 3 outfield positions, including center field. I think for Peyton Berdick, the ceiling is higher than Ryan McKenna. Now, the floor right now, in terms of who you would trust, the Orioles would probably still lean McKenna if it was between the two, just because he's been with the O's for 3 years. And although the hitting isn't there, he doesn't have as big a hole in his swing, I don't think. They're similar players. Berdick just has a higher ceiling. I think if the Orioles are going to have Berdick here in camp, he would be in a competition with Ryan McKenna. And I think at this point, we've seen enough of McKenna. They probably view Berdick in a higher standing, especially if they've acquired him now twice. They've brought him back now this offseason after DFAing him. There's clearly something they like, something they think they can fix in Berdick's swing to turn him into a true major leaguer. So if the O's think Berdick is just McKenna with a higher ceiling, and the O's like him enough to claim him twice, but they're not going to give him a chance to make the team right now. Again, you send him down to minor league camp, he's not making the opening day roster. That tells me that the Orioles don't feel like they need to fill a spot on the roster right now for that right-handed hitting, center field playing outfielder. They thought at one point they might have needed it, but what that tells me is if they might think Berdick is better than McKenna, and since they're sending Berdick down, they don't need that spot. They think Jorge Mateo, with his ability to play the outfield now, who also played right and left on Sunday, can play that role on the team, which tells me, again, connect all the dots Pepe Sylvia style, that I just don't think Ryan McKenna is going to make this opening day roster. And I know some people were like, yeah, we already knew that. But some people are worried that's going to happen. I just think this is another point that McKenna's getting DFA'd before opening day. It's not going to be there for him. But that's the recap of the Orioles weekend. They just continue to win a bunch of spring training games. It's kind of funny at this point. They are 18-5-2 in spring training now. And a lot of that's Kyle Stowers. 3 home runs on Sunday. What a spring this guy is having. But these games don't count. And that's the big thing here, right? Yeah, Corbin Burns gave up a couple of runs. Yeah, Kyle Stowers hit 3 home runs. Like, it's things on both sides. But these games do not count. So you're only taking a lot of this stuff to a certain degree. It's all with a grain of rice, right? You're not looking fully into everything that happens surface level because these games literally do not count. But the games do start to count in 10 days. That is when the Orioles kick off the 2024 season. And I wanted to run through their schedule in full. What are the easy parts? What are the hard parts? When do the O's need to take advantage? All you got to do is get enough wins to get into the playoffs by the end of the year. We saw from the Diamondbacks last year, once you get in, anybody's got a chance. So coming up next, I break down the Orioles' 2024 schedule. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or on a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers can get $200. That's right, $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. I got Tennessee. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. So we're going to dive in here to the Orioles 2024 schedule. But before we do that, as you know, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. And baseball fans, you're going to want to mark your calendars for March 20th. That's this Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. On Wednesday, March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, be the first to get local insight from the MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network, including yours truly. Find it on Wednesday, March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. So we're here breaking down the O's schedule. And we did this before last season, and some of it kind of came true, right? The Orioles did capitalize on their weaker parts of the schedule. But in general, last year, the Orioles capitalized on every part of the schedule. They went 101-61. It was an incredible season. They won the AL East. There's no guarantee that's going to happen again, right? I mean, we think the O's are going to win this division. We think they've got the team to win it again and go back-to-back. And the Yankees missing Garrett Cole for a while doesn't make them as scary, but they did go and get Juan Soto. They should be a better team this year. I don't know if the Blue Jays are going to be a better team, but they could be. I don't know if the Rays are going to be a better team, but they could be. Thing is, it's really hard to repeat 100-win seasons. It's really tough. You could have just variance in how players work out. So it's important to look at the schedule and see, okay, where can you maximize your wins and bank some wins? And the big thing about the Orioles schedule is they can bank some wins early. And we're going to go month by month here, taking a look at the O's schedule, where it gets easy and where it gets kind of tough for the Orioles. So let's start in March and April. Remember, there's a little bit of baseball in March this year. March 28th, next Thursday, is opening day. So March/April gets kind of just put into 1 month entirely. They start the month with the Angels. That is the Shohei Ohtani-less Angels. Now, they will have Mike Trout back, but they do not have Shohei Ohtani, and that is huge. And guess what? They weren't good with Shohei Ohtani anyway. They've actually got 6 games against the Angels in March and April. They start at home against the Angels, and then they play them on the road later in the month. And it's same with the Royals. The second series of the year, the Orioles host the Royals. Now, the Royals, credit to them, they've gone out and added a bunch of big league pieces this offseason, but they are still not a good baseball team. The Orioles also travel to Kansas City later in the month as well. That's 6 against the Angels and 6 against the Royals. Now, I'm using the PECOTA projections for these rosters, which are updated, the ones I used as of Thursday, March 14th, I believe. And I get it, right? PECOTA's pretty low on the Orioles. I think they have them at 86 or 87 wins for the year, so I understand. But it's a good kind of full projection system for the entire league. They've got the Angels projected for 74 wins and the Royals at 71. I honestly think that Royals projection is kind of high for them. Then the Orioles go to Pittsburgh and go to Boston. The Orioles start the year with 5 consecutive series against teams projected by PECOTA to have a losing record. 3 versus the Angels, 3 versus Kansas City, 3 in Pittsburgh, 3 in Boston, and 3 at home against Milwaukee. Although Milwaukee did win 90 games last year, they traded away Corbin Burns, and they don't have Woodruff, and the team's looking a little different, and PECOTA projects them for 79 and 83. That is a time where you can get off to a hot start. They do play 3 against the Twins in March and April, a team that's projected for 90 wins. And at the very end of the month, they do have 2 against the Yankees, projected for 92 wins. But remember, they also have 6 against the Angels and 6 against the Royals because they play them again. And they also have 3 against the Oakland Athletics. Going to be, again, the worst team in baseball, projected for 64 wins, probably a little high at the end of the month as well. The combined projected winning percentage for all of the games/teams that the Orioles are playing in March and April is 470. That is by far the easiest month that the Orioles have on their schedule. So the big first thing to know is the Orioles need to jump on it in April. Again, 5 consecutive series to begin the year against teams projected by Pacoda to finish under 500. So you look at those series, that's 15 games in total. I mean, you got to come out of that at like 10-5. And I get it, right? Those first 15 games aren't going to make or break your season. But that's going to be one of the potentially easier stretches the Orioles play all year, and it's to begin the season. So coming out of the gate hot is going to be huge for the O's. Now, it's unfortunate they're not going to have John Means. They're not going to have Kyle Bradish for that stretch. We hope they're otherwise healthy. But you got to jump on these guys early. That is going to be huge here. And again, the only full series that's going to be tough is going to be that Minnesota series. And it's not like that's an elite team. Some of their projecting to win 90 games is just because the AL Central, their division, is an absolute disaster. That's one of the reasons why they won it last year. March and April, O's need to jump on it. Then in May, it gets a little bit tougher, but you still need to capitalize in May. They start with 2 against the Yankees, and then it's 3 in Cincinnati. Pacoda kind of low on the Reds, projecting them for only 78 wins. Then 2 against the Nats on the road. That's going to be a terrible team. And then they've got kind of like those, could go either way teams for a while. 3 against the Diamondbacks. Yes, they went to the World Series, but, their team last year only won 84 games. Like, it wasn't an amazing team. 3 against Toronto. Who knows what that team's going to be? 3 against Seattle. Again, who knows what that team's going to be? 3 in St. Louis. They're probably looking for a bounce back year. And then 4 in Chicago against the White Sox. That's going to be a disaster team. And then 3 at home against Boston. And then 1 game to start a series against the Rays at the end of the month. Now, that's a little tougher, right? You've got the Diamondbacks, and you've got Toronto, and you've got Seattle, and some better teams in there, Yankees at the top. But still, those games combined is still a 492 projected winning percentage for all of those opponents in May. That's still under 500. You still got to capitalize there. So if you're the Orioles, you're looking at this, kind of March and April set of games, and you're playing 29 games in that stretch. Like, if you can get off to a really good start, you can get a 19-10 start to this season against those teams, and then you put yourself in a good spot where maybe in May you don't have to play at that rate, but you can win 55% of those games in May. You set yourself up really, really nicely, because in June things flip the exact opposite direction for the Orioles. Look through the June schedule and tell me you're not scared for what the O's have to go up against. Now, I understand the Orioles are also one of the best teams in baseball, but what they face in June, it's a lot. So it starts with 2 games at home against the Rays, and then later in the month, they also have 4 at the Trop against the Rays as well. They got 4 in Toronto. Then it's 3 at home against the Braves, maybe the best team in baseball. 3 at home against the Phillies, one of the better teams in baseball. Then 3 in New York against the Yankees. 3 in Houston against the Astros. 3 at home against Cleveland. And the month ends with 4 at home against the defending World Series champion Texas Rangers. Every single team the Orioles play in June is projected by Pacoda to finish with a winning record this season. That's kind of unbelievable. They go an entire month without playing a team projected for a losing record. The worst team they will play in that month is the Cleveland Guardians, who Pacoda projects to finish 83-79, which I could totally see the Guardians doing. I mean, I believe they did finish a little below 500 last year, but they won the division 2 years ago, and it's still mostly that same young team. They could get back to being in the division hunt. I mean, Tampa, Toronto, Atlanta, Philly, New York, Houston, Texas. Wouldn't be surprised if all of them were playoff teams this year. And Cleveland could be too. It could be all playoff teams they're facing in June. So you got to bank some of those wins in April and May, because June is coming for you, and it is going to be a test for this Orioles team. Now, the hope is, you would think the O's will have John Means back in June. A little bit more far-fetched to have Kyle Bradish back, but you never know. What if Kyle Bradish showed back up in June and helped them out? That would be fantastic. So that's kind of the first half of the season. So what happens in the second half? Does it look more like April? Does it look more like June? We'll get to that to finish off the pod coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's what brings home the winning trophy, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. So with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So we are finishing off, taking a look at the Orioles 2024 schedule, breaking it down for you. What we know so far, March and April, very easy. May, kind of easy. June, watch out. 550 is the combined projected winning percentage in June for the Orioles opponents. Again, no teams projected to finish under 500, and you could argue that every team they play in June could be in the playoffs in 2024. That's absurd. July gets a little better for the Orioles in July. It's kind of a mix and match. And that is shown by the fact that the July opponents' projected combined winning percentage is 505. So basically right around 500. They start with 3 in Seattle, right? It's going to be a fairly good team. Missed the playoffs last year, but it should be a good baseball team. Then 3 in Oakland. You got to take advantage of that. 3 at home against the Cubs, who nobody can kind of figure out. They're actually projected by Pacoda to finish a perfect down the middle 81 and 81 this season. Then 3 at home against the Yankees, who could have Garrett Cole back by then if he doesn't have to get Tommy John. Then 3 in Texas against the Rangers. Then 3 in Miami. Marlins have had a million pitching injuries so far. I know they went to the postseason last year, but they are in a tough spot pitching injury-wise. Then 3 at home against the Padres. I mean, they did just get Dylan Cease, but I mean, who knows what the Padres are going to be doing this year after what the heck happened last year. And then 3 at home against Toronto. It's really kind of a back and forth. Again, 505 winning percentage in July. It's kind of more of a normal month in Major League Baseball, honestly. Then you go to August, where it does get a little bit tougher. In August, you start with 4 in Cleveland, always a tougher place to win, and then 3 in Toronto and 3 in Tampa. That is a really tough 10-game road trip to start the month of August for the Orioles. Just like coming right off the trade deadline there, that's going to be a tough stretch. Then you're back home. It gets a little easier. 2 versus the Nats, 4 versus Boston, 3 in New York against the Mets. Another team where you're like, who knows? I mean, they're projected to go 83 and 79, but we don't really know. Then you finish August with punch in the face, and a time of rest. 4 at home against the Astros, 3 in LA against the Dodgers. That is going to be a heck of a 7-game stretch. And then you finish August at Coors Field with 2 out of 3 games of a series against the Rockies. So that loosens things up a little bit. But the opponent winning percentage, 516 for the Orioles combined opponents in August. Like, that is still a tough month. Now, hopefully, because, that'll be the first full month after the trade deadline, they'll have some reinforcements potentially to help out this team. And then you go to September. And I think the one good thing about this Orioles schedule is you can get off to the hot start, right? Easiest month by far, March and April. And honestly, May isn't too bad either. And then the next easiest month after that is September, which I think is really helpful. You're pushing for the playoffs. Maybe you have a chance to rest some guys if you need to, if you're getting ready for the postseason, whatever it may be. It starts with the final game of that series in Colorado against the Rockies. And then you come back home for 3 against the White Sox. So after playing Houston and LA, Houston and the Dodgers back-to-back, the next 2 series are the Rockies and the White Sox. What a turn of events those 4 series are in a row. Then they're home for Tampa. Then it's at Boston. Then they're in Detroit. The Orioles actually play all 6 games against the Tigers in the month of September, which is kind of an interesting schedule quirk for a team that's not in their division. The Tigers, they'll probably be better this year than they were last year. Pacoda projects them for 75 and 87 this season. They've certainly gotten better, no doubt about that, this offseason. Just don't quite know if they'll be a good team yet. I honestly don't think they will. I don't think the offense is there yet. So 6 against them should be helpful. Then you got 3 at home against the Giants. They've also gotten better after kind of a disappointing season. And then you end the year with 6 on the road, 3 at Yankee Stadium, and then kind of odd here, the Orioles end the year with 3 at Target Field against the Twins. They are the one AL East team that doesn't play a division opponent to end the season, because of course you got 5 in the division, so somebody always is going to play out of division. It'll be the Orioles at the Twins. But because of the White Sox games and the Rockies games and 6 against Detroit, the combined winning percentage for the teams in September is just .495. So a little bit of an easier landing for the 2024 season, all in all, for the Orioles. So basically, as you're looking through this schedule, look at the Orioles record at the end of May. That is going to be huge. If the O's are, a couple games over 500 at the end of May, might be saying, we're playing solid baseball. They can turn it on. But think in the back of your head, they might have missed their shot to pull away. And if the O's are, 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 games above 500 at the end of May, we'll feel great about it. But just remember what's coming up in June. All playoff teams, 550 winning percentage in June. We're going to learn a lot in these different months from the Orioles, but it's good to kind of know that, hey, things are going to start off a little easy, maybe a little more pressure on the O's. You got to kind of win these games early. These are the easier ones. Then also knowing, hey, if the O's lose 4 out of 5 in June, 5 out of 6, we're like, oh no, the world's falling. Just remember, this is the toughest part of the schedule. It's only going to get easier from here. And always know that September is lurking where things do ease up a bit for the O's. But that's a look at their 2024 schedule and a look back at the weekend for the Orioles as well. No O's game in spring training today on Monday, but we will be back tomorrow. We're getting closer and closer to opening day, and this, what should be an amazing 2024 season. And on tomorrow's episode, I've got some bold predictions for you. I'm going to go through my 6 boldest Orioles predictions for the 2024 season. Some of them you'll say, yeah, Connor, of course that's going to happen. That's not bold. And some you'll say, well, that's pretty bold. That's what's coming up on tomorrow's episode. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.